Please for me. Please forgive me.
The story follows Det, a man who believed he had finally found peace after a painful divorce from his ex-wife, Huyen.
Step up into the van.
He builds
Watch your
a
head.
new life with Huyen and their young daughter, Maya, only to discover that the past is not so easily left behind. From the moment Thuy's brother shows up at their home to harass and threaten Huyen and Maya, to the incident where Det encounters a mysterious young woman in the forest and helps her out of kindness, a chain of events begins to tear his family apart. Doubt, emotional wounds, and constant arguments push Det's fragile happiness to the edge of collapse. After many sleepless nights, Det realizes these events are not coincidences. He reports everything to the police, and the truth is gradually revealed. It was all part of a scheme orchestrated by Thuy, driven by jealousy and her desire to seize full control of the farmland compensation money. In the end, Thuy is arrested and awaits trial, while Det and Huyen struggle to heal and rebuild the trust that was nearly destroyed. This is a story about greed and resentment, but also about truth, family, and the price people pay for schemes born from the past. If you found this story meaningful and want to hear more dramatic, emotional, and real-life inspired stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss future episodes. Your support is the biggest motivation for us to keep sharing powerful stories with you. Det once believed that the storms of his life were finally behind him. After his broken marriage with Thuy, he chose silence, endurance, and distance from the past, hoping to begin anew with Huyen, a gentle, hard-working woman, and little Maya, whose presence felt like a fresh start. Their small house on the edge of the village, facing open fields and distant rows of trees, was a place Det believed no one could intrude upon or destroy again. But Det was wrong. Everything began on what seemed like an ordinary afternoon. While Huyen was home, there was suddenly a violent knocking at the door. When she opened it, she froze. Standing there was Tomat, Thuy's younger brother. His face was flushed, his eyes filled with hostility, his voice sharp and aggressive. Without listening to any explanation, Tomat accused Huyen of taking someone else's place, of turning Det against his past, and hurled threats that made her tremble. Little Maya cried in fear, clinging tightly to her mother. Huyen stood helpless, her heart pounding. She could not understand why her husband's past had come crashing into her present so brutally. If neighbors had not rushed over after hearing the commotion, no one knows how far the situation might have escalated. When Det returned home and heard the whole story, he was stunned. Anger surged within him, mixed with an unsettling sense of unease. That very night, he called Thuy. On the other end of the line, she answered coldly, dismissively, denying any involvement. Her calm tone sent a chill through him. At that moment, Det realized that between them, there was no longer understanding, only unresolved darkness. He tried to convince himself that Tomat's behavior was merely impulsive, that Thuy would eventually stop. He didn't want Huyen to worry, nor did he want his fragile family peace to be haunted by shadows of the past. But that carelessness paved the way for a far more calculated scheme. A few weeks later, on a late rainy season afternoon, Det went into the forest as he often did. The forest had been a part of his life since his youth, a place where he gathered honey, bamboo shoots, and where he found calm whenever his mind was troubled. That day, the forest felt unusually quiet. The wind rustled gently through the leaves, sunlight filtering down in narrow streaks on the damp ground. As he was preparing to leave, he heard a faint sound, a weak groan carried by the wind. He stopped, listening. The sound came again, broken and fragile. His instincts, shaped by years living close to the forest, would not allow him to ignore it. He followed the sound and found a young woman leaning at a tree. She looked exhausted, her face pale, her clothes smeared with dirt. When she saw Day, she tried to stand but nearly collapsed. In a trembling voice, she said she had been lost since morning and no longer had the strength to go on. Her fear, her weakness, her appearance, all convinced Day that she was truly in danger. Dusk was approaching. Leaving someone like that alone in the forest would be extremely dangerous. Without hesitation, Day decided to take her home so she could rest, planning to help her return the next morning. At that moment, he had only one thought: helping someone in need. He had no idea that every step he took was part of someone else's design. When Day supported the young woman into the yard, Wen was cleaning up in the kitchen. Hearing movement, she stepped out and froze. There stood her husband, clothes stained with mud, helping an unfamiliar young woman out of the forest. No explanation was needed. Wen felt as though her heart was being crushed. Memories of Thuy, of Tomat, of the earlier threats surged back all at once. Wen said nothing. She turned back inside in silence, but that silence was more terrifying than anger. Dinner that night passed in suffocating tension. The young woman was allowed to rest in the outer room, while an invisible distance grew between Day and Wen, one both of them felt deeply. In the days that followed, conflict slowly ignited and then erupted. Wen became withdrawn, cautious, her eyes clouded with doubt. Day tried to explain, but his words felt clumsy and inadequate. Wen no longer had the certainty needed to believe that everything was as simple as he claimed. The breaking point came when Wen discovered that the young woman had left early one morning, appearing perfectly healthy, nothing like someone who had nearly collapsed in the forest. Suspicion hardened into deep hurt. Arguments broke out repeatedly. Little Maya became frightened whenever her parents raised their voices, her innocent eyes filling them both with guilt, yet neither could calm themselves enough to stop. Day fell into despair. Night after night, he lay awake staring at the dark ceiling, piecing everything together. From Tomat's intrusion to the girl in the forest, all the events shared a common thread: timing and intent. Each one targeted Wen, targeted his family. And once again, the name Thuy surfaced clearly in his mind. Day recalled the rare conversations he had had with his ex-wife. Thuy had always expressed resentment over the compensation money for farmland she had not yet received from the state. In her mind, Day was deliberately withholding it, and Wen was the one manipulating him. Jealousy and greed had twisted Thuy's thinking, leading her to construct a narrative fueled by hatred. The next morning, after a nearly sleepless night, Day went to the police and reported everything, withholding nothing. Authorities immediately began investigating, from neighbors' testimonies to Wen's statement to identifying the young woman from the forest. Each piece slowly fell into place. The truth, when revealed, sent chills even through Day himself. The young woman had been hired by Thuy. Every detail in the forest encounter, the location, the timing, the performance, had been carefully staged to exploit Day's kindness. The goal was simple: destroy his marriage, push Wen out of his life, and seize full control of the compensation money. When summoned by the police, Thuy initially denied everything, but confronted with undeniable evidence, she eventually broke down. In the interrogation room, she cried and confessed. She admitted she had never accepted that Day had moved on. In her distorted thinking, she believed that if his new family fell apart, everything would return to how it once was. Thuy was taken into custody, awaiting trial. As the prison gates closed behind her, her scheme came to an end. Healing took time. Wen had to learn to trust again, while Day came to understand that his silence and carelessness had also contributed to the damage. But in the end, they chose to stay together, for Maya and for the future ahead. One quiet afternoon, sunlight spread gently across the yard. Day held Wen's hand and understood that some dangers do not come from strangers, but from unresolved ties we believe are already behind us. And he learned one final truth. The truth may arrive late, but it is always strong enough to shatter even the most carefully constructed schemes born of greed and hatred.
Hello, xin chào tất cả các khán giả của kênh Live Single RV. Vậy là câu chuyện của chúng ta đã kết thúc tại đây. Trong câu chuyện hôm nay của chúng ta thì Huyền đã bị vợ cũ của Đệ nghi ngờ là Huyền ngăn cản Đệ khiến cô ta không lấy được tiền bán đất, khiến cho cô ta giở trò hãm hại đối với Huyền. Nhưng sự thật là Huyền không hề liên quan gì đến vấn đề đấy, mà cô ta vẫn cố tình hãm hại Huyền. Do đó Đệ và Huyền đã quyết định báo cảnh sát, khiến cho Thúy, vợ cũ của Đệ, bị công an bắt. Mọi tình tiết hấp dẫn về câu chuyện của Đệ và Huyền sẽ còn được kể ở các video tiếp theo. Các bạn hãy bấm vào nút subscribe để đăng ký kênh nha. Đặc biệt đừng quên bấm like, share và để lại bình luận ở dưới video. Cảm ơn các bạn rất nhiều vì đã luôn theo dõi ủng hộ kênh của mình. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.